Jonathan Rugman reporting. Now, it's official. Vladimir Putin has signed a law formally making Crimea part of Russia. These are the scenes of celebrations in Moscow and across the Crimean region a short time ago. There were signatures being inked in Brussels too, when Europe's leaders signed an agreement to forge closer economic ties with Ukraine. They also agreed a few more sanctions, adding a dozen new names to the list of Russians now prevented from travelling to Europe. Putin himself had a good laugh about it all, promising to open an account in one of the blacklisted banks. Our political editor Gary Gibbon reports from Brussels.
Pledged in ink, European solidarity and support for Ukraine. The EU says this association agreement proves they want Ukraine, their Prime Minister, here for the ceremony, in their sphere of influence. But EU sanctions against Russia still amount to a banned list of individuals, now 12 names longer than it was.
The communiqué says the EU's committed to uphold the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. But what do the last few weeks really tell us about just how far the EU's willing to go to stop the redrawing of the map?
Since the EU last met, Crimea has been annexed, and some people would say all the EU has done is add 12 names to a list. Do you not think that the EU is basically saying Crimea is now a changed fact on the map?
It's up to everyone to decide. Do we share value or we share values? You need to pay the price, and we all need to pay the price for peace, stability, security, and values.
Can you tell me one single punishment that the EU has meted out on Russia for the annexation of Crimea that is a serious punishment? Can you tell me one?
The best way to contain Russia is to impose real economic leverage over them. Because what's happening? They are selling gas and oil mainly to the European Union. Then they take euros, dollars, and pounds and buy armaments, armed vehicles, tanks, and invade an independent country.
In Crimea, Russia evicted more Ukrainian troops today. But EU economic sanctions will only be triggered if Russia goes deeper into Ukraine. EU leaders wouldn't even say what sectors of Russian industry they might hit. But David Cameron said if they came, sanctions would hurt Russia more than Europe.
Europe is, I think, 25% or so reliant on Russian gas, but if you look at Gazprom's revenues, something like 50% of them come from Europe. So, Russia needs Europe more than Europe needs Russia.
And with all the talk of sanctions, Russian shares fell again. But President Putin went ahead with signing into law his annexation of Crimea, and he threatened Ukraine with a multi-billion-pound bill for energy contracts. The 12 extra names added to the EU list of banned Russians included state TV host Dmitry Kisilov, who at the weekend boasted Russia could nuke America into radioactive ashes. Some EU leaders were reluctant to bring sanctions against a journalist, but were eventually persuaded Mr. Kisilov wasn't technically involved in journalism.
As the summit finished, I caught up with the Lithuanian president, and I started by asking her, was she really convinced her EU partners would risk their own pockets for Ukraine? Are you absolutely convinced that they would impose real economic sanctions, not on individuals, but on whole areas of Russian industry? And what will be the trigger for it?
It's not the stage yet we are talking about it, but what was very clear today that we were able to agree on second package of, as we call second stage of sanctions, including these 12 names. They were quite sensitive. The highest level of parliament or Duma people, very close already to the circles of Putin, and including one Kremlin propaganda person who is doing a lot of damage, especially for the neighboring countries with the lies and all these kind of things.
Since the last time all of Europe's leaders met, Crimea has been annexed. And some people will look at the measures actually taken here and say, all you've done is add 12 names to a list and cancelled a few meetings. And basically, it now seems that the EU accepts the map is redrawn. Crimea is part of Russia.
I think that at least the West nations, democratic nations, free nations, will never accept this as a fact. Probably we're going for a long frozen conflict situation. Yes, this is a phenomena where one civilization is not able to understand what another one is doing. And this is a very bad phenomena, a very dangerous phenomena. But anyway, nobody wants to have a conflict larger than it is supposed to be.
What does it feel like to be in a neighbouring country at the moment?
We declared our independence from the Soviet Union. Economic blockade was applied 8 months against us. No hot water, no energy, and we were sitting with gloves and with the coats in our offices. So we knew and we survived. We're not afraid. We used to this neighbor, and we think that our spirit still and understanding what means to be free and independent